John, the president gave what many are calling a historic speech on the Middle East last week. Prime Minister Netanyahu from Israel came here. There's been a bit of a fuss. Can you tell us what's going on?
Well, the president felt you can't talk about the Middle East and not say something about the Arab-Israeli conflict. And when he said something about the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Israeli government got all up in arms about how the president was prejudging the outcome of negotiations and how the president was leaning toward the Palestinians. In reality, the president was using a formula he had used before, that had been used before in joint statements. And I think what it really tells you is not where the president's intentions are, but what's happening to the U.S. Israeli bilateral relationship.
What is happening to this relationship? It's been a consistently strong relationship since Israel's birth, and just about every U.S. president has had a strong bond with his counterpart in Israel. What's happening here?
Well, actually, every president hasn't had a strong bond. We've had strong bonds between labor prime ministers and U.S. presidents, especially Democratic presidents. As Israel has moved to the right and as Israeli politics have moved to the right, we've sometimes had tensions between the Likud prime ministers. We certainly had a period of tension when Benjamin Netanyahu was the previous prime minister and Bill Clinton was in the White House. I think we are seeing a return to that, a sense, I think a very dangerous sense, that support for Israel is being perceived, perhaps in the United States, certainly in Israel, as something where Republicans see more eye to eye with Israelis than Democrats do. I think if we go into the future and you have a situation where there's a sense of closeness between only one party in the United States and Israel, I don't think that's good for Israel. I don't think it's good for the U.S. Israeli relationship that so many people are intent to keep very strong.
Some would say President Obama provoked the prime minister by his statements about the return to the 67 borders. Now, of course, the president said a return to 67 borders with land swaps, appropriate land swaps.
Mutually agreed land swaps.
Mutually agreed land swaps. But was there a problem with the way President Obama communicated this that the Israeli prime minister didn't understand? I have to also think that our government and their government had been talking about this for quite some time, and as you mentioned before, this formula is not new. It was underscored in President Bush's roadmap. It dates back to the Clinton administration, in fact.
If you go to the Israeli Foreign Ministry website and look at a joint communique from a meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Secretary Clinton, it has precisely the same language about the U.S. view that you have to reconcile a Palestinian desire for a state within 67 borders with mutually agreed swaps and an Israeli desire to live in peace and security in the region. That has not only been the U.S. position that the two can and need to be reconciled, but it appeared in a joint communique that the Israelis put on the Foreign Ministry's website 5 or 6 months ago.
Is this a perilous moment for the U.S.-Israel relationship?
I think we're getting into a time of choices. The president really wants to move. I think the Israeli prime minister really thinks this isn't the time to move. There's too much uncertainty, that if Israel were to make concessions, it would have the concessions pocketed by the other side, that engaging in a peace process now doesn't lead Israel toward greater security. You can have differences of opinion, but I think it's dangerous when you start insulting the other side gratuitously. It's dangerous when there's a sense that you're breaking down that partnership that Israeli prime ministers have struggled for so many years to create with a broad swath of the American public. I think there's deep sympathy to Israel in the United States, and not only you see it through polling, you see it through congressional voting, you see any number of indicators, but I also start to see indicators that there's a divergence. There's a divergence among the Israeli public, which is drifting rightward, a divergence among the American public, which in some cases is drifting away from the kinds of Cold War issues that drove Americans and Israelis together. I think it's not necessarily a perilous moment, but people are making choices now that are going to have consequences far into the future. And I don't think everybody understands what those choices are. I don't think people fully appreciate the implications of those choices. And we may find ourselves in 5 years' time in an extraordinarily different position and ask ourselves, how did we get there? And a visit like this, which should be a love fest, which starts off instead with a food fight, is one of the signs that we have to start thinking about the choices we're making.
Jon Alterman, fascinating stuff. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.